My entitled brother and his bride-to-be coveted my legacy. When our parents sided with them, all hell broke loose. All right, so let me lay this out for you. My name is Liam. I'm 32, an architect. I run my own small firm, pretty proud of what I've built, literally and figuratively. I've always been the pragmatic one in my family, the one who plans, who saves, who thinks 10 steps ahead. Maybe it's because my younger brother, Ethan, has always been, well, Ethan. He's 28, the golden boy, charming as all hell, but with the follow-through of a mayfly. For years, I've been working on this urban renewal project, a community-focused, sustainable housing initiative. It was a dream I shared with my late Aunt Carol. She was this incredible entrepreneur, sharp as a tack, and she saw something in me, in this project. Her faith in me, and the legacy she left to help make it happen, means more than I can say. The trouble, as it often does, started subtly. Ethan announced his engagement to Chloe. We were all at my parents' place for Sunday dinner. Chloe was a lot, incredibly polished, stylish, exuding this relentless charm. She worked in marketing, she said, and immediately launched into her vision for their wedding. Grant doesn't even begin to cover it. Her father, Marcus Thorne, a businessman with a handshake that felt like a dominance play, was there too, making these smooth remarks about starting young Ethan off right and how important family support is. I got this weird, antsy feeling from Chloe's perfection, her eyes that seemed to catalog everything. Over the next few weeks, Chloe made a point of engaging me. At a family barbecue, she cornered me by the grill, asking all these intelligent-sounding questions about my firm, the scope of my work, any big, exciting projects on the horizon. She had this way of phrasing things, making it sound like genuine interest, but my internal alarm bells were ringing softly. I kept my answers polite, professional, but a little vague. Then came the more direct approach, still wrapped in that deceptive sweetness. It was another family get-together, I think Mom and Dad's anniversary. Chloe, with Ethan hovering beside her like an eager puppy, brought up Aunt Carol. "It must be such a comfort, Liam," she said, her voice dripping with synthetic sympathy, "knowing you have that substantial nest egg from dear Carol. Ethan and I were just saying, planning a wedding these days is like a down payment on a house." She laughed, a light, tinkling sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. Ethan chuckled along, a beat too late. I took a breath. This was it, the first probe. Instead of just shrugging it off, I decided to be clear. Aunt Carol was incredibly generous. I said, my tone calm but firm. And the funds she left are specifically for the urban renewal project we discussed for years. It's a long-term commitment, tied to her vision for the community. I wanted to lay down a marker to make it clear this wasn't just a pile of cash waiting to be raided. My mom, Susan, chimed in quickly. "Oh, of course, dear, your project is wonderful. Carol was so proud of your plans." Dad, David, just nodded, but I saw something flicker in his eyes, a kind of speculative look I didn't like. Maybe Marcus Thorne's talk about family alignment had already started to work on him. Later that night, a weird sort of curiosity got the better of me. I looked up Chloe on social media. Her profiles were a masterclass in curated aspiration. Luxury handbags I couldn't name, dinners at restaurants where the water probably cost $50, selfies in exotic locations. It all seemed a bit much, especially compared to her carefully crafted narrative about the overwhelming costs of their dream wedding. It wasn't a crime to have expensive taste, of course, but it was another little thing that made me uneasy, a tiny crack in the polished veneer. The feeling that something was off, something was heading my way whether I liked it or not, started to settle in my gut. The subtle probes didn't last long. Chloe, it turned out, wasn't a fan of subtlety when it wasn't getting her where she wanted. She started approaching me directly, usually when Ethan was with her, a sort of silent, moral support prop. One afternoon, they dropped by my office unannounced. Chloe, all wide-eyed enthusiasm, gushed about this renowned wedding photographer whose style was just to die for. Apparently, his retainer was a cool $20,000. "We were just brainstorming," she said, her hand fluttering near her chest. "And Ethan had this lovely idea. Maybe as a truly special wedding gift, you could help us secure him? Just a thought, of course." Family helping family with these once-in-a-lifetime things, you know? I kept my expression neutral. Chloe, as I've mentioned, Aunt Carol's trust is very specific. Those funds aren't accessible for personal gifts, no matter how special. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Oh, she said, her voice a little flatter. Right. The project. Ethan then tried his angle. He caught me alone a few days later, looking genuinely conflicted. Come on, Liam, he started, his voice earnest. You know how much this means to Chloe. It's her dream wedding. Remember when I crashed my bike as a kid, and you spent your entire summer savings to help me buy a new one so mom and dad wouldn't kill me? This is kind of like that, but, adult-sized. It would mean the world to her. And to me. He even threw in a bit about feeling like a failure because he couldn't give her everything she wanted on his current sales commissions. The guilt trip was laid on thick, but comparing a $20,000 photographer to a 10-speed bike from our childhood was a stretch, even for Ethan. Naturally, I talked to my parents, hoping they'd see how inappropriate these requests were becoming. Their solution? Mediation, which translated to mom and dad sitting Ethan, Chloe, and me down in their living room, the air thick with forced pleasantries. Their grand compromise was that I should consider lending Ethan a smaller sum, say $50,000 from my personal savings. You can just reimburse yourself from the trust when it becomes available, dear, Mom suggested, as if it were that simple. Dad, clearly feeling the heat from Marcus Thorne's talk of family alliances and potential business introductions that never seemed to quite materialize, added, Don't be so rigid about everything, Liam. This is about family unity. Sometimes you have to be flexible for the greater good. I pointed out, as calmly as I could, that lending money from my savings with the intent to repay it from a restricted trust was likely a breach of that trust's terms, not to mention financially unwise for me. Dad just sighed, a portrait of paternal disappointment. Then things took a slightly more sinister turn. My firm was a finalist for a small but quite prestigious local design award. We'd worked our tails off on the submission. The day before the final presentation to the judges, our main presentation file, the one with all the renderings and detailed plans, was somehow corrupted, vanished into the digital ether. We scrambled, worked through the night, and managed to piece together a decent backup, but it wasn't our best. We didn't win. I couldn't prove anything, of course, but a nasty suspicion began to form. Sarah Jenkins, a sharp junior architect in my office, mentioned a few days later, quite casually, that she thought she'd seen Chloe near our office building around the time the file went haywire. She was having coffee at that little place on the corner, Sarah said. I just remember thinking it was a bit of a coincidence, seeing your brother's fiancée downtown on a weekday. A coincidence, right? I laid all of it out for my best friend, Ben Carter, over beers. Ben's a lawyer, corporate stuff mostly, but he's got a good head on his shoulders and a low tolerance for nonsense. He listened to the whole saga, from the wedding photographer to the corrupted file, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. Liam, he said, finally, this Chloe sounds like a professional. The way she's isolating you, manipulating Ethan, even this subtle pressure on your parents. And that file? That's worrying. Don't underestimate her. You need to document everything. Every request, every weird incident. Everything. His advice, usually a comfort, just made the knot in my stomach tighten. The failed design award, the corrupted file, it was a subtle escalation, but it showed me Chloe wasn't just about charming her way to my bank account. She was capable of something more underhanded. Ben's advice to document everything echoed in my head. The next offensive was a direct assault, framed as another brilliant opportunity. Ethan, looking more like a ventriloquist dummy for Chloe, and, I suspected, Marcus Thorne, pitched me an unmissable investment. Apparently, one of Marcus's associates was involved in some high-end property development, and they were looking for seed capital, a mere $200,000. This way, Liam, Chloe cooed, her eyes shining with feigned excitement. Your money actually works for you, generates incredible returns, and you're helping us secure our future. It's a total win-win. Think of the family building wealth together. This time I was ready. Thanks to Ben, who'd warned me about these kinds of family and friends investment traps, I didn't just refuse. I engaged. That sounds fascinating. Ethan, Chloe, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Could you walk me through the detailed business plan? The projected ROI, the risk assessment, Marcus's exact financial stake, and personal guarantees? I need to see all the due diligence, of course. Ethan blinked, completely lost. Chloe tried to recover, babbling about exclusive pre-market details and trusting family connections, but the polished facade had slipped. I let the silence hang for a moment before saying, I only invest in projects I've personally vetted from the ground up, and right now, all my capital and focus are on the Aunt Carol Memorial Urban Renewal Project. Their faces fell. Score 1 for due diligence. The fallout from that refusal was immediate. Chloe, clearly frustrated, went to work on the family network. She spun a tearful tale to my Aunt Patricia, David's sister. Patricia is a lovely woman, but a staunch traditionalist who believes in family harmony above all else, sometimes to a fault. According to Patricia, who called me later that week, her voice laced with gentle disapproval, I was being surprisingly cold and unfeeling. Chloe had apparently convinced her that I was jeopardizing Ethan's happiness and future, and that my hoarding of Aunt Carol's money was certainly not what dear Carol, who loved family so much, would have wanted. I tried to explain the complexities, the restrictions, Chloe's relentless pressure, but Patricia just sighed and said, Liam, dear, sometimes you just have to be the bigger person. He's your only brother. And Chloe is such a sweet girl, just understandably stressed about the wedding. It was like talking to a beautifully embroidered brick wall. Then came the call that really solidified my resolve. Dr. Evelyn Hayes, Aunt Carol's closest friend and the executor of her will, phoned me. Dr. Hayes is in her late 60s, a retired judge with a mind like a steel trap and zero patience for fools. Liam, she said, her voice crisp and direct. I received a rather persistent inquiry today. A young woman, who didn't give her name, but identified herself as a close family friend concerned about Ethan Davies' upcoming marriage and the financial pressures involved, was attempting to ascertain if the terms of Carol's trust could perhaps be made more flexible in light of a significant family need. My blood ran cold. I, of course, informed her that the terms of a testamentary trust are immutable and divulged no information whatsoever. Dr. Hayes continued. But I must say, her line of questioning was impertinent and bordered on improper. Carol was exceptionally clear about her intentions for you and the project. I thought you should be aware. She paused, then added, if you require any support from my end in upholding Carol's wishes, do not hesitate to ask. Her words were like a steel rod down my spine. This wasn't just about family drama anymore. Chloe was actively trying to interfere with a legal instrument. The final straw in this particular siege phase came at a large pre-wedding event hosted by the Thorne family. Some sort of elaborate cocktail party at a country club. It was all very ostentatious. Marcus Thorne was in his element, glad-handing everyone. During a lull, Chloe, with her father beaming beside her, decided to put me on the spot. She raised her champagne flute. And as we look forward to our special day, she announced, her voice carrying across the hushed patio, we've been dreaming of the most incredible honeymoon, a true once-in-a-lifetime trip to Bora Bora. And we were so hoping that Liam, with his renowned generosity and success, might consider helping us make that particular dream a reality as a spectacular wedding gift. All eyes turned to me. The silence was deafening. I could feel the collective expectation, the unspoken pressure. For a second, I wanted to tell her exactly where she could stick her Bora Bora honeymoon. But I caught Ben's eye across the room. He'd come as my +1 for moral support, and he gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. So, I smiled as warmly as I could manage. Chloe, Ethan, I said, my voice steady and clear. My greatest and most sincere gift to you both is my heartfelt wish for a lifetime of happiness together. As for material things, Aunt Carol's legacy, as you know, has very specific and important plans attached to it, plans I am dedicated to fulfilling in her memory and for our community. But tonight, let's all raise a glass to your beautiful future. I raised my own glass. There was a smattering of applause, a few murmurs. I navigated it. but the look on Chloe's face was pure acid. Marcus Thorne's smile was gone. The siege was definitely not over. Chloe was incandescent with rage after my public deflection at the Thornes party. The carefully constructed image of a doting fiancé gently hinting for help had been replaced by something harder, more desperate. A few days later, she and Ethan cornered me after I left a site meeting for my project. There was no pretense of charm this time. "All right, Liam." Chloe spat, her voice tight with fury. "No more games. $250,000. That's what it'll take to make this go away, to give us the start we deserve." Ethan stood beside her, looking like a deer caught in very expensive headlights, but he nodded his grim agreement. "And if you don't agree," Chloe continued, her eyes like chips of ice, "I will make it my personal mission to ensure everyone in this town, every potential client, every single person in your precious professional circle, knows exactly how you've callously mistreated your only brother and abandoned your family in their time of need. It might even affect your firm's reputation, you know. People talk. Bad news travels fast." The threat was blatant, ugly, and aimed right at my livelihood. That was it. This was no longer just about money or family pressure. It was extortion, plain and simple. I met Ben immediately. He listened, his face grim. "This is actionable, Liam. That a direct threat to your professional standing. We decided a cease and desist letter was no longer a last resort, but a necessary shield. Ben advised me to try and get more concrete proof of her harassment, especially the threat. Remembering Chloe's earlier social media boasts about always getting what she wants, I spent a few hours digging through her older, public posts. It was a gold mine of entitled bragging and thinly veiled accounts of past manipulations. Then, thinking about her threat, I checked the local laws with Ben regarding recording conversations. With his cautious okay from my state, the next time Ethan called, clearly coached by Chloe to reiterate their demands, I recorded the call where Chloe, in the background, repeated her threat to my reputation. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Ben drafted a cease and desist letter that was a masterpiece of legal precision. It cited the specific instances of harassment, the undue pressure, Chloe's attempt to interfere with the trust administration, referencing Dr. Hayes' alert without naming her directly as the source to me, and the explicit threat to my business. It demanded they immediately halt all such activities and any further communication regarding the inheritance. We sent it via certified mail to both Chloe and Ethan. The explosion was instantaneous and nuclear. Ethan called first, his voice hoarse with a mixture of disbelief and rage. "A lawyer, Liam? You're sending legal letters? To your fiancée? Chloe is devastated. She's in tears. How could you? They're my parents. Mom was hysterical. A legal document, Liam? Against your own brother? Is this what our family has come to? After everything we've done for you, for this family?" Dad was colder, his voice clipped with disapproval. "You've clearly made your choice, Liam. You've chosen this path. Don't expect us to fix the damage you've caused by escalating it like this." The irony of him accusing me of escalation was apparently lost on him. A few days of tense, angry silence followed. I felt sick about it, but also a strange sense of relief. I'd drawn a line. Then, the Real bomb dropped completely by accident and from an unexpected quarter. It was a Tuesday morning. My inbox pinged. An email from Ethan. The subject line was frantic, urgent. Need to understand this. And it was addressed to the Davies family group email list. My parents, Aunt Patricia, a couple of other cousins, and me. Attached was a horrifyingly long email chain. My heart hammered as I opened it. Ethan, it seemed, had been trying to forward this chain to Ben. I'd actually suggested to Ethan, during one of his less hysterical calls, that if he truly felt so misunderstood, maybe he should talk to a neutral third party, and Ben, bless his loyal heart, had offered to listen to Ethan as a friend, not officially as my lawyer to him, just to give him a chance to be heard if he genuinely wanted it. The email chain Ethan had accidentally blasted to the entire family was not between him and Chloe. It was between Chloe and her mother. And it was beyond damning. Chloe, in excruciating detail, was complaining to her mother about Ethan's utter lack of ambition and how she planned to mold him into something presentable. She outlined her entire strategy to wear Liam down, using my parents' desire for peace and Ethan's insecurities as leverage. She callously referred to my parents as easy marks. But the worst parts were about the Thorns' own finances. Apparently, they were leveraged to the hilt, and this good marriage for Chloe, coupled with a hefty infusion of cash from my inheritance, was critical to maintain appearances and fund Chloe's and their expected lifestyle. There was even a shockingly cold comment about my beloved Aunt Carol. Too bad the old bat put so many strings on it, but we'll get around Liam and his silly project eventually. He's too soft. Her mother, far from being a voice of reason, was actively coaching Chloe on manipulation tactics, suggesting ways to increase the pressure on me and my parents. In his panic and distress, trying to get this to Ben, Ethan had clearly typed our family group list into the to field by mistake. The digital silence that followed the delivery of that email was heavier than anything I'd ever experienced. For a full 5 minutes, nothing. Then, Aunt Patricia's email landed in everyone's inbox, a reply all to Ethan's accidental bombshell. Her message was short, sharp, and shaking with fury. Chloe? Susan? David? What in God's name is the meaning of this? Old bat. The fallout from Ethan's accidental email was swift and brutal. Chloe and her mother went into immediate damage control, sending out a flurry of panicked emails claiming the chain was a misunderstanding, a private joke taken out of context, or even that Chloe's email had been hacked. But the sheer volume of detail, the specific, callous remarks, and the consistent tone of manipulation throughout the lengthy exchange made their denials utterly unbelievable. Marcus Thorne, the puppet master behind so much of Chloe's ambition, simply vanished from all communication. His bluff had been called on a monumental scale. Ethan was a wreck. He called me, not screaming this time, but audibly sobbing. He confessed everything. How Chloe had played on his every insecurity, his desire to finally be seen as successful, how she and her father had painted this picture of a golden future entirely dependent on accessing my inheritance. He admitted he'd been a willing participant in the pressure campaign, partly out of weakness, partly out of a desperate hope that this time, one of his ventures, or rather Chloe's venture funded by me, would actually succeed. He sounded genuinely broken, not just by the public humiliation, but by the stark realization of how thoroughly he'd been duped and how horribly he'd behaved. My parents were next. Mom called, her voice thick with tears. The old bat comment about Aunt Carol, her beloved sister-in-law, had apparently cut her to the core, finally shattering Chloe's carefully constructed image. She offered a halting, painful apology. Liam, we were so wrong. I was so focused on keeping things smooth, on Ethan's happiness. I didn't want to see. I am so sorry. Dad's apology came later, in person. He looked older, defeated. He admitted that Marcus Thorne's vague promises of business connections had appealed to his own anxieties about retirement and status, and he'd let that cloud his judgment. I pressured you, and I was wrong, son. I failed you. It was the most honest I'd ever heard him be. Aunt Patricia also reached out, her voice filled with shame. Liam, my dear boy, I was an absolute fool. That young woman twisted me around her little finger with her tears and her talk of family. Carol will be so deeply disappointed in me for not seeing through it. Please, tell me you can forgive an old woman's gullibility. The engagement, of course, was obliterated. It was messy, public, and a topic of hush gossip for weeks. Chloe and her family retreated from the social scene, their carefully crafted image in tatters. Ethan, to his credit, started therapy. Ben knew a good therapist who specialized in issues of self-esteem and manipulation, and Ethan, with my reluctant encouragement, actually went. Months have passed. My urban renewal project, the Aunt Carol Memorial, is finally gaining real momentum. We broke ground last month. Dr. Hayes was there, and she squeezed my arm, her eyes bright, and said, "Carol is beaming down on you today, Liam." I know she is. My parents and I are navigating. I'm civil. I attend family dinners, but there's a new boundary, a line they know not to cross. I told them, trust isn't rebuilt with apologies. but with consistent, respectful actions over a very long time. I'm willing to see if that's possible for us, but my life, my decisions, and especially Aunt Carol's legacy will not be compromised or subjected to that kind of pressure ever again. They accepted that quietly. Ethan visited my office last week. He looked better, more grounded. He's got a modest job in logistics, something with steady hours and no false promises of grandeur. He didn't ask for anything. He just talked about his therapy, about learning to value himself for who he is, not who Chloe wanted him to be. As he was leaving, he paused at the door. "I have a long, long way to go, Liam," he said, his voice quiet. "But I'm trying to be someone Aunt Carol wouldn't be ashamed of either." I just nodded. There was a flicker of something, maybe the first thaw after a long winter, but I couldn't be sure. I find myself looking at the blueprints for the project often. That inheritance, I realize now, was more than just money. It was a crucible. It tested every relationship I had, forced me to define my own worth, my own boundaries. I protected Aunt Carol's dream, and in doing so, I found a strength I didn't know I possessed. The cracks in our family foundation, though, they're still there. Some might eventually mend with time and effort, becoming scars that tell a story of lessons learned. Others, I suspect, will remain permanent reminders of the ordeal. But one thing is certain. The future is mine to build on solid ground and entirely on my own terms. And there's a certain hard-won peace in that.